right. And we are live. All right, gang. Welcome back to the soapbox. It's been a little bit. It's been a crazy start of the year, as I'm sure it's been for most of you guys. So I wanted to make sure I gave this the proper time and thought, but also make sure that I figure, a lot of people have kind of got their feet underneath them now with the new year and back into a routine or what their routine should look like. So we're back and we'll be back and consistent, no doubt. But I hope everyone's doing well. Want to jump right into a quick little soapbox on something I call the Pendulum Theory. So, and again, listen, Pendulum Theory, I'm sure that there's something way more advanced than what I'm going to talk about. It's just something that I've kind of learned when I was, I've talked about me being in therapeutic boarding school when I was a kid, when I got into a lot of trouble. It was introduced to me then, and I'll introduce that a little bit and talk about how that has stuck with me, really, gosh, for, almost half my life now as I get older. Those numbers start to sound more aggressive, half. So what does the pendulum theory mean? So, sitting in just a quick background, when I was in trouble and all that, I got sent away to the woods for 2 months, where, for those of you that, have listened to some of my story, you know that deeper story. But then after that, I went to a therapeutic boarding school, and this was about like a 2-year journey. And, so from a therapy perspective, we did, I think 3 or 4 large group sessions a week. And then you had individual therapy, and then you'd have big workshops as well, 5 big workshops. And they used Latin words. The first one was in, see if my memory can serve me right. We had integritas, we had amacitia, animus, teneo, and then veneratio. All Latin words for different things. For those of you that know that stuff, you obviously can derive integritas, integrity, and amacitia is friendship, animus is celebration, teneo is truth, and veneratio is, I forget what that one is. That was the last one, like maybe honor or transition or something like that. Now, with that said, there were some really talented individuals there from a therapy perspective, but more what is there? Communication, understanding, and here's something. So we're in the day and age, and the reason why it's on my mind is because there's so much talk about I'm listening. I'm doing a lot of diversity training, inclusion training. There's so much difficult things happening in the world, from a lot of people hating each other, anger with each other, the decisiveness. There's a lot out there, and it's easy to get overwhelmed by it. And when I hear about all this, it really brings me back to some simple things about just your emotions and understanding. And something that really hit me, and like I said, is this notion of the pendulum theory of, in order, and it really, if we think about how we feel, think about your emotions as a pendulum. And for those of us that want to picture this, is that if you just leave a pendulum right in the middle, it will never swing. It's not moving. And, you just pick it up a little bit, it just goes back and forth a little bit. And one could equate that potentially with depression, where you're in this purgatory state where you're not really feeling these emotional swings. You're not unbelievably sad or mad or angry, but you're not unbelievably happy or joyful, right? So you're right in the middle. You're in this state, and there's a lot that goes on there. And this is very general. This is my understanding. By no means is this anything, proven or scientific or anything like that. But then obviously, the more you pull up, say, towards happiness and joy, it's going to swing. You have to let it go. And then what's going to happen on this other side? And so there's this pendulum in life. And it's funny because a lot of us strive for happiness, and a lot of us strive for whatever that might be, joy, glee, all of that. But most of us try to avoid pain. Most of us try to avoid discomfort. Most of us try to avoid sadness. And so really what tends to happen here, and I'm really, what I'm saying tends to happen, I'm just looking at my life and overlaying that into this theory to be very clear, not on, any sort of anything else there. And most of us spend our whole lives running from things, running from whether it is trauma, pain, discomfort, and a lot of this in form of memories or things that happened to us. And listening to people, my peers at this school, talk about these things. And really this was brought up because here's the thing I learned, and it's been something that is still hard for me to fully grasp because of how much pain people carry around. Things happen to people in their life that are so unfathomable and so horrible. And you would never know that because people are so good at disguising it. They're so good at hiding it. They spend their whole life working on that craft alone. But what they've never actually done is actually let that emotion sink in and essentially crush them, bury them, because of how much pain is there. And there's guilt. There's all sorts of these emotions that are associated with this. And in turn, you start to get these indirect variables associated with this type of behavior. So then, as kids, we acted up, we did whatever it might be, we break the law, you do all these things. And those outside actions none of those are the cause, right? That's an effect. That's sort of a byproduct of what's happening on the inside. And this is where you hear a lot of people talk about, like, there's so much more happening, all these people that do bad things. And we'll talk about that at the end if I get to it. But of course, there's a root cause. And some of these root causes are so deep and buried that some people might not even know, right? Because we're so good at burying, whether it is, awful things, whether it's death of a loved one, a family member, other things that happen to you that are traumatic and, unspeakable. And what we spent years doing is unearthing a lot of these things, and I would listen to them, and I would sit across. We did Milan-style therapy, which is in a circle where you'd actually, if you're going to address someone, talk to someone, anything at all, you'd get up, you'd walk across a circle, so you're directly face on them. You couldn't speak to someone that's to the left or right. You'd always have to be relatively directly across. And then we learned about body language and where your hand positioning was and all these things. Open body language versus closed body language, and discussing this and being very vulnerable, right? And if you're going to speak to me and I'm going to speak to you, being vulnerable is a challenging thing. So how do you meet people in the middle? So we did this, and if by no means am I an expert on really anything, I don't think, but if we just seeked more opportunity to learn about people, I think we would be really in a much better place. There's so much misunderstanding and quick to judgment, and I think we're all very similar from the sense of what we're dealing with in some way, shape, or form, in some way more than others, right? And when you understand that, it really does give you perspective, the perspective that you would never really have. So I think here's a good assumption. Assume that most people are really struggling in life, because they are. And oftentimes they don't even know it because it's been suppressed for so long. But just be mindful of that. And that's this thing, like when you come to like treating people equitably, blah, 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 just be a nice person. Treat people how you'd like to be treated at the core. Care, compassion, all of these things. And I think that can be very, very powerful. Just take a step back to think about that. And so, for me, I did a lot of opportunity to think, when I was in therapeutic boarding school, and this notion of the pendulum really hit me. And as life went on, I graduated from that school, and I went to college, and I got in still a lot of trouble, made a lot of mistakes. So, it's like, I hate when people are like, all these things. Like for me, I made a lot of mistakes and continue to make mistakes. Very thick-headed, very blinded by all sorts of things. And, I think that's something that I was very fortunate of people, and I've talked about this a lot, that cared about me almost more than I cared about myself at points. But, there were a few times in my life where I truly remember, really having to own certain things. And it's like ownership of my behavior, ownership of my actions, because ownership of your behavior, your actions, your feelings, those things, that sucks when they're not good. When you do things that you're not proud of, when no one would be proud of what you're doing, and it's embarrassing, when it's painful, right? But you need to do that in order to push through. And that for me was the biggest turning point in my life, is that when I realized that, and I've said this before, the biggest empowering moment was when I realized that I was 100% responsible for every single thing in my life. My actions, my words, the people I decided to surround myself with, all of those things, everything was my fault. Nothing was someone else's fault. And the reason why that was so empowering is because I spent my whole life blaming others for what was happening to me. And it never, and that was a defense mechanism to never allow those feelings in. And, it was always someone else's fault. And then, because what happens is when you let these things in, like as a kid of a divorced family, like, when you truly let it in, like you start to feel like, was it my fault? And that sucks. That's a really hard thing to feel, right? But you have to go through that. Truth to it or not, feelings are real from the sense of how it makes you feel, and that's important. A distinction between thoughts and feelings, it's really, really important too. Like, are you thinking this? Are you feeling this? We went through a lot of that type of stuff, and that's for another conversation, probably, way beyond where I'm at now. But getting back to the pendulum theory, as we kind of talk about this, is like you could going through this process. One, it's a never-ending process. Obviously, you're swinging back and forth and back and forth. And a few things that I really, really like about that theory is how applicable it is to everything in life. You have the deep, dark, dirty things in life that you really need to dig out. And that's what I would say, like, that's going to be I would say your ceiling, right? So you have what's your apex of joy and happiness, and what's your, what are your depths of sadness and pain and anguish. And that's really what you're willing to unearth, unpackage about your life, okay? Because that's for sure the ceiling there. And the lower that ceiling is, the more challenging life is going to be, in my opinion. Because you're not able to truly experience the ends of the spectrum, which are pretty awesome. And keep in mind, everyone has their own journey. I mean, for me, I was forced into scenarios. Luckily, I was able to make something of it. Not all of them, but some of them. Now, let's just equate this. Let's bring it back to, for a lot of us out there, you know me from a fitness perspective. Well, the reason why I love the pendulum theory from a fitness perspective is because how hard fitness is in order for it to get results. Intensity is an independent variable most commonly associated with maximizing rate of return on favorable adaptations, right? What does that mean? Intensity gives you results. You want favorable adaptations, whatever it might be. You need to work hard. It just so happens there is a kernel, there is a key in order for you to unlock that intensity piece. Hard work sucks. And what I mean by that, it's not easy. It's not something that just happens, right? You can't expect. I wrote this quote down for the hand plant. You can't expect this maximal reward with minimal effort and minimal input. And it just so happens physical adaptation is uncomfortable. I mean, who would have thought growth is uncomfortable? It is painful sometimes. And I think that it's like this whole thing of like, the gym shouldn't be painful. It's like, well, really, when you think about what's happening with muscle growth, with increasing your body's thresholds, you're growing, you're breaking, you're building. It's like just think about common sense, people. Like, it sucks. I mean, growing pains is a real thing. Because it's a process that's legitimate. I mean, and not only that, there's vulnerability within it. Just think about like animals. Like here's a crazy weird example, right? Like arachnids, right? Spiders, they molt, right? And when they do that, they're very vulnerable. They're growing, and it's a challenging process, but they're very vulnerable in that process. Well, bring this back to our world. It's like, you're pretty vulnerable at the end of a workout when you fully sent it, right? But you got nothing. Like you spent it all, but in the pursuit of growing, of getting better, of increasing that threshold. So I think in a fitness world, and that's what separates the best athletes in the world to the somewhat best, all the way down to the people that are, doing nothing. Now, what is that spectrum? It's your ability to consistently work hard. It's your ability, and also there's a whole other caveat of how to do that, right? If you want to keep working harder, you need to unlock opportunities to do that. So again, in just a quick tangent, that's why you need to learn more skills. You need to move better because you can then move faster. You can move more weight with less wasted energy, be more efficient, blah, 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 blah. But really what that's doing in the long run is giving you a higher ceiling for you to do more and garner more adaptation because you can go heavier and faster. And we know that we have force, load, body weight, distance, reps, blah, 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 and then your time. Those things lead to more power, more intensity, more results. So when we think about this, guys, fitness is a beautiful example of the pendulum. You need to swing from one side to then reap the benefits, right? And that's something that's very, very important to understand, and it's hard for most people to truly understand, okay? So now, let's think work, right? Like, it's the same thing. It's like the pendulum, like if you really want to reap, if you want to feel great, you want to be at the best, you want to be the top of your field professionally, anything, right? I mean, you have to go into the dark depths and work your butt off. Like, no one's going to know what you're doing. You have to wake up early, stay up late. Everyone's like, well, that's not the way it should work. It's like, well, it is the way it works. You know, like, I do think we coddle people too much. That doesn't mean we can't be empathetic, doesn't mean we can't be sympathetic, doesn't mean we can't listen and learn. But if you want for that pendulum to swing, you need to work. And you need to roll up the trenches and roll up the sleeves and dig the trenches, okay? And there's really no exceptions there. It's like, no matter what field you're in, that's what it comes down to from a work perspective, from a family perspective. Oh man, right? Like that pendulum. Like show me a family that is healthy, and show me a family that is thriving, and you're also going to see some pretty challenging fights and tough communications and tough moments, and moments where they maybe would have questioned if they're going to get through it, right? Because this stuff's hard, but you have to talk to each other, talk to your wife or your husband and your kids, and get real. It's a never-ending process, right? It's like, your family is your family, whether you have a 2-year-old or you have a 22-year-old. I mean, we have to go through this together. But understanding that if you avoid it, failure is going to actually be where you're living. It's this unhappy purgatory. It's this unsatisfactory. It's this cup that is just, it's not empty, it's not full, it's just there. You're not sure what to do with it. Right? So I know I'm hitting you with a lot here, but this is just something that's really, really important to me in the sense that we talk, everyone's like, work hard, like we put up that quote, like don't expect maximal results with minimal effort, all of these things. But I think we need to really understand also how we can understand this about other people. Okay? And there's two pieces here. One, we need to listen, learn, and grow. And that's something I think a lot of people are living in echo chambers now, which is like they only want to be around people like them. They own and here's the thing. If you have a diverse set of people that you're surrounding yourself with, you should be challenged. And on all things, challenging is good. If everyone you surround yourself with agrees with you on one topic, then you're in an echo chamber. The minute you get outside of that echo chamber and you're not, sensory deprived, you're going to learn something, okay? And sometimes it's painful to learn that what you've been doing, or like it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to have made a mistake. It's okay. Education is to listen, learn, and potentially change your outlook or your perspective. That's part of life. I mean, think about this. Do you think a lot different now than you did 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Yeah. And I think that that's where a lot of people are missing nowadays. You got to swing. You got to hurt. You got to feel. It's scary. And honestly, people that has never learned how to get in touch with their feelings, and the older you get in life, the harder it gets to do it. I mean, it's just the same thing with it's not that it's impossible. It's just like fitness. It's like if you're 50 years old and you've never worked out in your life and you're 400 pounds overweight, yeah, it's going to be a harder journey for you to achieve, to get down to your goal weight than if you were 20. Okay? And you just have less time under tension, whether it's with a good or bad habit that you've developed. And I think you need to be honest with yourself there too. And also what that looks like. And there's going to be some challenges, and it's not going to be rainbows and butterflies all of the time. And it's, and that's part of the deal, right? Because again, you'll swing up, but you're also going to swing back the other direction. And you cannot forget that. It's okay. And very esoteric, very big picture, but it's something that was on my mind. I wanted to share that and hit some of those topics there. But, listen, learn, be a good person, and guys, also be aware that's not everyone is ever going to want to do this, which, there are some assholes out there. There are some people and that's okay. It's okay not to like people. You can try, but there's just some people you might not be compatible with. And it might not mean they're a bad person. But it's okay. It's take some personal responsibility too, and have some tough skin too. That's important. It's not all about you. That's important. I think nowadays everyone thinks it's about them, right? Altruism, I don't know if that really exists. Really fun arguments there from philosophers and stuff about, altruism and like what's the most altruistic act, and even in the most altruistic act, is there a threat of selfishness? Really cool stuff. You want to dive into that stuff. So, but not now. Another time, gang. Soapbox, 20 minutes. Thank you.